Let's start by delving into one of the most critical moments in the recent history of Barcelona. After years of financial difficulties, the club finally seemed to have found the formula to return to the top level. The arrival of Hansi Flick as coach had brought new energy, and Nico Williams was the missing piece, the winger specifically requested by the German coach to complete his sports project. The young athletic club attacker represented everything Barcelona needed: youth, talent, speed, and that special spark that can make the difference in big matches. His profile perfectly matched the club's philosophy and Flick's tactical needs. But what seemed like a done deal, an operation that would benefit all parties involved, turned into a nightmare orchestrated from the Liga offices. And we're not talking about simple bureaucratic obstacles or the typical administrative complications that can arise in any transfer. We're talking about a deliberate campaign to weaken Barcelona, led by a man who has turned his position into a personal crusade against our club. A man who used his power to influence decisions that should be purely sporting and commercial. To understand the magnitude of what happened, we need to go back to Tuesday, June 25th. On that day, Nico Williams had made a decision that thrilled millions of Kules around the world. He wanted to wear the Blaugrana jersey. Negotiations with Barcelona were practically finished. Only the final administrative details remained. The player had communicated to his closest circle his intention to join Camp Nou. His agent had maintained fluid conversations with Barcelona's leaders, and everything indicated that the official announcement was a matter of days. The excitement among Barcelona's supporters was palpable, and social networks were filled with welcome messages for the one who would be the team's new winger. But on Wednesday, June 26th, something radically changed, and that something has an exact name and date: the secret meeting between Javier Tebas and the leaders of Athletic Club de Bilbao. A meeting that, according to all sources consulted, should never have taken place and marked a before and after in the relations between the Liga and Barcelona. Miguel Galán, a renowned journalist with direct sources at Athletic Club, revealed details that make one's hair stand on end. At this meeting, Tebas not only provided confidential information about Barcelona's financial situation, but practically wrote the script that Athletic would use to convince Nico Williams not to leave San Mamés. The information exchanged at this meeting was of such importance that it completely changed the landscape of the negotiations. We're not talking about public data or information that any club could obtain through official channels. We're talking about specific, confidential, and strategic details about Barcelona's situation. The forbidden information. What kind of information did Tebas share? At this clandestine meeting, according to the sources consulted and the testimonies gathered, the president of the Liga revealed specific details about several critical aspects of Barcelona's situation. The real state of Barcelona's financial fair play. Tebas provided detailed information on the club's exact figures, including internal projections that should only be known to Barcelona's management and the Liga's auditors. This information included not only the current situation but also forecasts for the coming months and potential complications that could arise. The specific problems with Rule 1.1. The president of the Liga explained to Athletic exactly what difficulties Barcelona would have in registering new players, including deadlines, specific requirements, and possible alternatives that the club could explore. This information was crucial as it allowed Athletic to anticipate Barcelona's moves, deadlines, and internal procedures. Tebas detailed the exact times Barcelona would need to regularize its situation, including information on ongoing audits, scheduled meetings, and decisions that had not yet been made public. This temporal information was particularly valuable to Athletic. Barcelona's legal strategies. According to sources, the legal avenues that Barcelona could explore to resolve its problems, including administrative appeals and possible lawsuits, were also discussed. This information allowed Athletic to anticipate the Catalan club's legal moves. This information is not only confidential by nature, but its disclosure constitutes a clear violation of the principles of impartiality that the president of a professional league must maintain. Moreover, it may constitute a violation of business confidentiality regulations and fair competition standards. But Tebas' obsession with Barcelona did not begin with the Nico Williams affair. To understand the magnitude of what we are experiencing, we must go back to April 2024, when the president of the Liga committed a serious irregularity that already alerted us to his true intentions. In April, Tebas published a document revealing that Barcelona did not comply with Rule 1.1 due to the VP boxes. This document, containing specific and confidential financial information about the club, was publicly disseminated without authorization and without following established procedures. The gravity of this action cannot be underestimated. A president of the Liga cannot, under any circumstances, make public the specific financial problems of one of its clubs without following the appropriate channels and without the corresponding authorization. Moreover, this is expressly prohibited by the confidentiality regulations governing the relations between the Liga and the clubs. The document had to be subsequently withdrawn due to its illegal nature, but the damage was already done. The information had circulated in the media, generated market speculation, and damaged Barcelona's image at a particularly delicate time. This episode was the first clear sign of a systematic campaign against the club. It was not an administrative error or an accidental leak. It was a deliberate action designed to harm Barcelona at a time when the club was working to resolve its financial problems. Once armed with this privileged information, Athletic Club devised a perfect strategy to retain Nico Williams. And it must be recognized that, from their perspective, they acted intelligently and effectively. It was not just about offering more money or better sporting conditions to the player. It was about something much more sophisticated, sowing doubt about the viability of Barcelona's project using information with the weight of official authority. Athletic wasn't speculating or making assumptions. They had concrete data provided directly by the president of La Liga. The strategy unfolded in several phases. First, they prepared the ground by gathering their arguments immediately after the meeting with Tebas. The goal wasn't to attack Barcelona directly, but to raise legitimate concerns about the operation's feasibility. Next, Athletic contacted the Williams family, arranging a meeting with Nico Williams, his brother Inaki, and their representative. During this meeting, they presented the information from Tebas as an institutional concern about Barcelona's ability to meet its commitments. The third phase involved creating a sense of urgency. After planting seeds of doubt, Athletic argued that the window of opportunity to renew with the Bilbao club was closing. They presented renewal as the safe option amid Barcelona's uncertainty. In the final phase, Athletic reinforced their position through the media. They used their media contacts to leak information about concerns related to Nico Williams' transfer to Barcelona, creating an environment of uncertainty in public opinion. The message to the Williams family was clear: Barcelona won't be able to register you. Even if you sign, there's a strong chance you won't be able to play the first part of the season or even the entire season. Are you ready to risk your career for an uncertain possibility? This information, coming directly from the president of La Liga, carried significant weight that Barcelona couldn't easily counter. How do you argue against the head of the competition when he says your registration is unfeasible? To fully grasp the severity of the situation, it's crucial to analyze the psychological impact on Nico Williams. At just 22 years old, he found himself at the center of a storm beyond his control or understanding. On one hand, he dreamed of playing for Barcelona, a club he had followed since childhood and the logical next step in his career. Barcelona wasn't just a professional option, it was a childhood dream coming true. On the other hand, he received official information suggesting this dream might not be viable. This wasn't just rumors or media speculation, it was the president of La Liga himself, through Athletic Club, telling him Barcelona couldn't register him. The psychological pressure on Williams was immense. At a pivotal moment in his career, he had to make a crucial decision based on conflicting information and amid an institutional battle he didn't start and couldn't control. Additionally, Nico had to consider not just his professional future but also the implications for his family. His brother Inaki was already established at Athletic, and Nico's decision could affect Inaki's situation at the club. The uncertainty created by Tebas's leaked information led to a stressful and confusing environment, making it impossible for Nico to make a calm, well-informed decision. Instead of evaluating his options peacefully, he had to navigate a maze of conflicting information and external pressures. When Barcelona learned that the Williams family had received this information and was starting to doubt, the management made a decision that, in hindsight, might seem hasty. They gave Nico a 48-hour ultimatum to make a final decision. However, considering the context, this decision was a defensive reaction to an unfair situation. Barcelona had experienced the previous summer the traumatic experience of pursuing a player for a month and a half, only for the deal to fall through. The management didn't want to repeat, especially when competing against privileged information from the president of La Liga. The ultimatum wasn't a sign of arrogance or impatience but a defensive move against unfair competition. How can you negotiate fairly when the other side has access to confidential information about your financial situation? Moreover, Barcelona had to consider other factors. The transfer market schedule. Each day spent without resolving Nico's situation was a day lost to explore other options. The transfer market moves quickly, and delays can be costly. Sports planning. Hansi Flick needed to know which players he could count on to plan for the pre-season and the start of the season. Prolonged uncertainty could affect team preparation. Institutional credibility. Letting the situation drag on could be seen as a sign of weakness or lack of control by the management. Economic costs. Keeping negotiations open for weeks has economic and opportunity costs that Barcelona couldn't afford. Thus, the ultimatum should be seen as a defensive measure in an extraordinary situation. Barcelona had to speed up the process because they were competing on an uneven playing field. When Gonzalo Miró later confronted Tebas about the meeting in an interview, the president of La Liga's responses were more telling for what he didn't say than for what he did. His hesitations, evasions, and obvious discomfort confirmed that something irregular had happened. Tebas acknowledged the meeting but tried to downplay its significance. However, his body language and hesitations suggested there was more to it than he was willing to admit. When Miró specifically asked what was discussed, Tebas tried to justify it as information that clubs can request. However, there's a vast difference between providing general regulatory information and revealing specific details about a competing club's situation. Regarding Nico Williams' registration, when Miró directly asked Tebas if he had discussed the potential registration of Nico Williams with Barcelona, Tebas did not deny it. Instead, he confirmed that it was one of the topics they had talked about and mentioned Barcelona's financial fair play issues. On the matter of confidentiality, Tebas attempted to argue that he had not violated any confidentiality norms, but his argument was confusing and unconvincing. His explanation suggested that he knew he had crossed a line that he shouldn't have. When Miró asked about the possible consequences of his actions, Tebas displayed a defensive attitude that contrasted with the confidence he had shown on other occasions. These statements, analyzed together, paint a picture of a man who knew he had committed a serious irregularity but was trying to downplay its significance and justify his actions. What is most serious about this situation is not just the harm caused to Barcelona in the specific case of Nico Williams. It's the precedent it sets for the future of Spanish football and the credibility of its institutions. If the president of La Liga can provide confidential information to certain clubs about others, where is the impartiality that should characterize sports institutions? Which club will trust Tebas after this? How can he maintain his moral authority when he has shown that he can act as an interested party in negotiations between clubs? The implications of this precedent are multiple and concerning. Loss of institutional trust. Clubs may begin to doubt the impartiality of La Liga in future decisions. This mistrust could affect the governance of Spanish football in the long term. Unfair competition. If some clubs have access to privileged information about others, the principle of fair competition that should govern professional sports is broken. Legal uncertainty. Clubs may start to question the validity of La Liga's decisions, which could lead to an increase in disputes and legal conflicts. International reputational damage. This situation could affect La Liga's image on the international stage, which could have economic and sporting consequences. Precedent for future actions. If this action goes unpunished, it could set a precedent that allows for future similar irregularities. This behavior is not only ethically questionable but could also have serious legal implications. Clubs' financial information is protected by specific regulations, and its unauthorized disclosure could constitute a violation of business confidentiality and fair competition standards. One of the most intriguing questions in this entire situation is Barcelona's apparent passivity in the face of these events. If such a blatant violation of impartiality truly occurred, why didn't the club take immediate legal action? There are several possible explanations for this apparent inaction. Long-term legal strategy. Barcelona may be preparing a broader legal action that includes this case and other irregularities committed by Tebas. A comprehensive legal strategy may be more effective than isolated actions. Avoiding conflict escalation. A direct complaint against Tebas could worsen relations with La Liga at a time when the club needs its collaboration to resolve financial fair play issues. Barcelona may be prioritizing the resolution of its immediate problems. Lack of documentary evidence. Although the testimonies are consistent and credible, Barcelona may consider that it needs stronger evidence for a successful legal process. Judicial procedures require irrefutable evidence. Political calculation. The club may consider it more effective to publicize the information and generate media pressure than to initiate a long, costly, and uncertain legal process. Strategic timing. Barcelona may be waiting for the most opportune moment to act, when it has more evidence or when the political situation is more favorable. Economic considerations. Legal processes are expensive and can last for years. Barcelona may be prioritizing investment in the team rather than legal expenses. However, this apparent passivity could also be interpreted as a sign of weakness that could invite future aggression. Barcelona must find a balance between strategic prudence and the firm defense of its interests. The failure of Nico Williams' transfer has had immediate and long-term sporting consequences for Barcelona that go far beyond the simple loss of a player. Hansi Flick had designed his tactical system counting on a winger with Nico Williams' specific characteristics. The player's speed, dribbling, and ability to generate numerical superiority in the final third were key elements in the German coach's project. The absence of Nico Williams forced Flick to rethink fundamental aspects of his game plan. The 4-3-3 system he had planned with Williams as the left winger had to be modified to adapt to the available players. The impact on sports planning. Barcelona had built its sports planning for the 2024-25 season around the arrival of Nico Williams. His absence created a void that is not easy to fill, especially considering the club's financial limitations. The loss of time in the market. While Barcelona pursued Nico Williams, other alternative targets closed their options or increased their conditions. The transfer market has its own rhythms, and delays can be very costly. The impact on team morale. The frustration of the Nico Williams transfer also had a psychological impact in the locker room. The players had been excited about the arrival of the winger, and his absence generated some disappointment. The long-term consequences. Beyond the immediate consequences, this episode could have long-term implications for Barcelona's ability to attract talent. If players perceive that the club has problems finalizing transfers, they may be more reluctant to consider offers from Barcelona. Facing the impossibility of signing Nico Williams, Barcelona turned its attention to Luis Diaz, the Colombian winger from Liverpool. However, even in this negotiation, the repercussions of the Williams affair are significantly felt. Luis Diaz profile. Luis Diaz is a winger with characteristics similar to Nico Williams, possessing speed, technique, and the ability to beat defenders. His experience in the Premier League and performances with the Colombian national team make him an attractive alternative. Complications derived from the Williams affair. However, Luis Diaz, aware of what happened with Nico Williams, has demanded specific guarantees regarding his registration. According to recent information, the player would be willing to forego a release clause, but in return, he demands considerable compensation if Barcelona cannot register him by August 31st. This demand is understandable from the player's perspective, but significantly complicates negotiations for Barcelona. The club finds itself forced to assume additional financial risks as a direct consequence of the loss of credibility generated by the Tebas Williams affair. Moreover, Barcelona must compete with other European clubs that do not have the same financial limitations. Bayern Munich, which is also interested in Luis Diaz following Musiala's injury, can offer more attractive conditions without the bureaucratic complications of Barcelona. The Saudi Arabia factor. The Saudi League, with its virtually unlimited economic power, represents a constant threat to any negotiation undertaken by Barcelona. Saudi clubs do not have financial fair play restrictions and can offer economic conditions that Barcelona simply cannot match. Barcelona's situation has not gone unnoticed on the international football scene. This case has generated comments and analyses in media worldwide, and the implications go beyond Spanish football. International perception of La Liga. International media have begun to question the governance of La Liga and the impartiality of its leaders. This perception can affect the image of the Spanish league in the global market. Impact on international negotiations. International agents and representatives are taking note of this situation. They may be more cautious in the future when negotiating with Spanish clubs, particularly with Barcelona. Consequences for European financial fair play. This case may also have implications for the implementation of financial fair play in other European leagues. UEFA is observing how this situation develops. Legal implications. From a legal standpoint, Tebas' actions may constitute several infractions, ranging from administrative to criminal. Violation of business confidentiality. The unauthorized disclosure of this information may constitute a serious violation of these regulations. Conflict of interest. A president of La Liga cannot act as an advisor to one club in negotiations involving another club. This action constitutes a clear conflict of interest that may have legal consequences. Unfair competition. Providing privileged information to one party in a commercial negotiation may constitute an unfair competition practice, which could lead to legal action by the affected club. Abuse of dominant position. Using institutional authority to influence private commercial decisions may constitute an abuse of dominant position, which is prohibited by competition regulations. Violation of fiduciary duties. As president of La Liga, Tebas has fiduciary duties to all clubs. Acting for the benefit of one at the expense of another may constitute a violation of these duties. These infractions could have consequences on both the sporting and civil levels, and potentially criminally. Administrative sanctions. La Liga could impose sanctions on Tebas for violating its own regulations. Civil actions. Barcelona could initiate civil actions for damages. Criminal investigations. In serious cases, criminal investigations could be initiated for potential economic offenses. The media dimension. The media management of this crisis also deserves a detailed analysis. We are witnessing a true war of narratives in which each party tries to impose its version of the facts. Tebas' media strategy. Tebas has historically used his media presence to defend his positions and attack his critics. His strategy is based on several elements: constant presence, victim narrative, attention diversion, and use of media allies. However, in this case, his communication strategy has been less effective. Contradictory statements, hesitations during interviews, and the inability to offer a convincing explanation have damaged his public credibility. Barcelona's media response. Barcelona, on the other hand, has adopted a more discreet but no less effective strategy. Controlled leaks, allowing information to come out through trusted journalists, third-party testimonies, and indirect pressure, generating media pressure without appearing directly as the protagonist. This crisis marks a turning point in the relationship between Barcelona and La Liga. Trust, a fundamental element in any institutional relationship, has been severely damaged, and the consequences of this breakdown will be felt for years. Possible scenarios: gradual reconciliation, prolonged confrontation, leadership change, external intervention. Factors influencing evolution: Barcelona's sporting results, media pressure, judicial decisions, political changes. This situation offers several important lessons for the future of Spanish and European football. The importance of institutional transparency. Sports institutions must maintain the highest standards of transparency to preserve their credibility. Opacity generates mistrust and can lead to situations like the one we are analyzing. The limits of institutional power. Positions of responsibility in sports cannot be used to pursue personal agendas or to favor certain clubs at the expense of others. Institutional power must be exercised with impartiality and responsibility. The necessity of control mechanisms. It is necessary to establish oversight and control systems that prevent the abuse of power by sports leaders. These mechanisms must be independent and effective. The value of impartiality. The perception of impartiality is as important as actual impartiality. Sports leaders must avoid not only real conflicts of interest but also the appearance of conflict of interest. The importance of governance. Good governance is fundamental for the healthy development of sports. Sports institutions must adopt the best practices of corporate governance.